All right, well, here on the blog again this week, and I'm really super excited to introduce Jaime Jo Wright. Hi, Jaime Jo.
Hey,
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good. Good to have you on the blog, and I just want to make the most of our time, so I'm going to hand it over to you right off the bat and let you introduce yourself and tell a little bit about you and your family.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm Jaime Jo Wright. I am published by Bethany House Publishers out of Minnesota, and I actually live in Wisconsin. I live with my family in the middle of the woods, and we live the happy little hidden country life out here with
Mm.
deer and raccoons, and we have possums that come onto our deck at night and wait for their bananas and little treats that I put out for them.
Oh
So
my goodness.
yeah,
Oh,
we're just a little bit of a wilderness family. I have two children, and my daughter's 12 and my son is 10. And I'm definitely working toward owning the cat lady crown. I have four cats right now. My goal is 20. My husband's is zero. So I'm not sure where we're going to wind up there.
yeah.
But we have four cats, and like I said too, then we have the outdoor menagerie that I wouldn't exactly call pets, but the two possums that come every night is we call them Floyd and Arnold, and
Oh my
I'm sorry,
goodness.
Floyd and Albert, and we they will come when they're called now, so they know that there's bananas waiting for
Wow. Now, before you mentioned possums, I was getting ready to say that sounds like such a wonderful place to live. But I'm not so sure I would love the possums.
them. I wasn't necessarily a huge fan, but they just really grow on you, and I didn't realize how social they are. They're just like my cats. I'll call for them and I'll be like, okay, Floyd, okay, Albert. And they'll come up to the deck and eat the scraps food. And then they
That's
go off into the
amazing.
wood. It's kind of, we sort of fell into it. And
Wow.
they only come out once the other cats have, the outside cats have been put in their shelter for the night. And that's when Albert and Floyd will come out. And then we just kind of
Yeah.
watch them. We never try and pet them or anything like that because they're
Yeah.
wild. But
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we watch them and we have conversations. And they kind of
Hmm.
look at us like, thank you.
Well, besides cats and possums, do you have any other hobbies? Things you do for fun?
You know, um, I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I do a lot of stuff with my family. So we like to rock climb. We like to do archery, kayaking. It makes me sound very athletic, but I'm not coordinated at all. So I'm usually the one that they're dragging along with them on all their escapades. Um, I'm typically most happy with just a book and a couch and
Hmm.
a quilt and a cup of coffee. So
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really good to me. Except I'll take hot chocolate in place of the coffee.
that is okay.
Somehow I never started drinking coffee. I don't know how that happened, but
Yeah, I was trained to when I was 3. My grandpa
oh
had
my
MS,
goodness.
and he would have his morning and afternoon coffee, and that was how I spent time with my grandpa. So we
Mm,
would have coffee and just became a thing.
yeah,
So,
sounds like good memories.
very
All right. So let's talk a little bit about your writing.
sure.
Tell us about your genre, what you write, and what inspired you to write that.
Well, my genre is kind of strange. It technically is typically put under the romantic suspense genre, although I typically describe it more as like a gothic mystery. It is dual time, which means part of the story takes place in present day and part of it takes place in the past. And typically, it's a story where a mystery begins back in whatever historical time period it falls,
Hmm.
and then it is continued on into present day, and our characters are linked as they are affected by this mystery. So it might be a house, it might be an unknown victim of some sort that they're trying to find the identity of. A lot of ancestry, a lot of Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights type vibe.
Hmm.
So it's a lot of fun to write.
Yeah. So what got you into that? What inspired you?
I grew up reading mysteries. I loved mysteries, and I think that was a natural segue for me to write stories with an element of suspense. But then I also loved historicals, and reading everything history books, fiction books or nonfiction, either or. And then I also would go antique shopping with my grandma and my mom, and it would bore me to tears when I was a kid. And then I started this game where I would go into all these different antique shops and I would pick up a certain piece, and then I would try to figure out, as if it could speak to me, what the story was behind this specific item, like who had touched it,
Mm,
what had it seen, kind of that concept of if walls could speak. And so I started creating lots of stories in my mind over these random articles in an antique store.
mm,
And that just kind of morphed as time went on, that everything that's old has a story and tends to affect the present, whether we know it or not.
mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of a natural segue then to weave that into novel writing.
Yeah, how cool. I love that. So tell us a little bit about hope and Christ and how you incorporate that into these mystery type stories.
Well, it's hope is something that is so difficult to find. And I think most of humanity struggles with finding an element of hope. And so the stories that I write always have a darker element to them. But threaded in that is a story of bringing the character from those darker places into a place where they can see a redemptive element, or they can see hope, and they can be able to envision the hand of the Lord working on their lives, even if it's not overt. Sometimes God does it very quietly, but He shapes our lives and He moves us. And so I try to weave that in with my characters so that readers can read it and they can come out going, maybe there is something I can hope in, and maybe
Mm,
there is a promise there that, regardless of the darkness and regardless of the mystery of life and the secrets and the surprises and tribulations, that there is a purpose, and there is always a resolution.
yes, amen. Amen. Everybody needs that, right?
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So, are any of your stories inspired by personal events in your life or true events from people you know?
Oh, sure, sure. Not so much my life. Some of them have been inspired by different historical events. The first book that I wrote, The House on Foster Hill, is centered around a woman who was found buried in an oak tree, a hollowed out oak tree. They found her body. And so that's basically the story of The House on Foster Hill, is who was this girl, and how back in the past to the present day, no one still knows who she is. And that was actually based off of a real story that took place during World War II, actually, where a woman's body was found in an oak tree over in England. And to this day, they do not know who she is. They don't know her story. They don't know how she
Mm,
got there. And there's all kinds of ideas as to what she may or may not have been involved with, as far as the war, the espionage, or whether it was just a random murder,
mhm.
so there's little pieces of history like that that will inspire a story. My other novel, The Haunting at Bonaventure Circus, is surrounding a circus, and I grew up in the hometown of the Ringling Brothers.
Mm,
So everything in my life has always been impacted, touched, fueled by the circus. And so that was kind of a no-brainer for me, that at some point I needed to have a story set with a circus. So
yeah, I haven't yet read that one, but it's definitely on my want to read list because it looks so interesting. The only other book I've read around a circus is Joanne Bishkoff, The Lady and the
mhm,
Lionheart. And
mhm.
I absolutely loved that book and the whole circus
Yes.
theme and setting. So I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to reading yours. It's on my list. My list is way too long and it keeps
Oh,
getting
so is mine.
longer.
Yes, I relate to that.
Yeah, so we talked about your cats and your possums. Do you have any other pets, and do these type of pets or animals find their way into your stories?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we are kind of a strange family in what we have for menagerie. I mean, right now we have probably, I think, 4 or 5 aquariums in our house filled with various types of fish. Um, and we have a leopard gecko as a pet.
Oh
And
my gosh.
and because the leopard gecko likes to eat, creepy crawlies, we've got a box of creepy crawlies in the house to feed the
Oh
gecko. And
gosh.
it just kind of keeps ballooning. So, but yeah, typically you'll find a cat or a dog very often winding their way into my story. We don't actually have a dog at our house, which is sort of strange, but I do like dogs, and so it's been fun to put them into my books. In fact, the Bonaventure Circus novel has a bulldog, a pit bull, in there because pit bulls have an interesting history of being
Mm.
nanny dogs, where they were
Oh,
entrusted with the care of babies. And because they were known for their fierce loyalty and they could trust that the pit bull would not allow anything bad to take the child. So wealthier families would have a nanny dog that was a pit bull. So I worked that into the story
mm,
as well. And it's just kind of a
interesting.
fun piece of history.
So my son and his family have a pit bull lab mix,
Mm-hmm.
and I see him, with their kids, a 4-year-old and a like 8-month old,
Mm-hmm.
and he's really good with them.
Yeah, yeah. There's, the pit bull breed is well, and they weren't called pit bulls necessarily back in that time period, but they got that name because of the dog fighting in the pits that they would
Hmm.
fight them in because they were such fierce fighters
Hmm.
for obvious reasons that then they were abused and turned into
Yes.
a breed that was not, synonymous with taking care of babies.
No,
But
no, they definitely got a bad rap because I
yeah,
wasn't, I will admit, I was not excited when my son got a pit
mhm,
bull mix and then had a baby. I was like,
right, right. Yeah,
yeah.
but no, you can go online and you can Google search pit bull nanny dogs and find old vintage photographs of babies in their little stroller things, whatever they were called, and
Hmm.
the dog's right there, right in there
Yeah.
in the picture. So
So, were you a reader as a child? Did you grow up
big
reading?
time. Hmm.
And so, what was your favorite book character?
Oh my goodness. That's a difficult one. Probably, I mean, I know most everybody tends to say Nancy Drew, but she
Mm,
really was one of my favorites. I love
yeah.
Trixie Belden.
Hmm.
Um, and I also was really into the Chronicles of Narnia. But you could pretty much feed me just about any book and
Hmm.
I would read it.
Yeah, yeah, that's was my favorite thing to do as a child
Mhm.
too, just in my room alone with a stack of
Yep.
books.
Yep. That was my little heaven was that with my
Hmm.
cat. So
Yeah. So let's talk about your current novel, the
Mhm.
one that's coming out April 5th is that
Yes.
launch day?
Yes, that is launch day.
Yeah, so by the time this interview airs, your book will have been out in the world almost a week, I think,
Okay. All
when this
right.
airs. So it will be available, everybody.
Yay.
So talk a little bit about the setting of the novel, and
Sure.
is that a real location or is it a place you visited? Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, The Souls of Lost Lake is the title, and it's set in northern Wisconsin, which is the Northwoods of Wisconsin, kind of in the area. I fictionalized the town and I fictionalized the place, but it is loosely based on towns up in that area. And there is national forest that starts there and stretches all the way up into Canada. So there's thousands of acreage that is all national land, and there's no real houses or any type of civilization. So it is, like I said, it is a fictional location per se, but I definitely built it off of personal experience of being up in the area. My husband grew up at a Bible camp up in that area. I grew up going to a Bible camp up in that area. So I did set the story at a Bible camp in the present day in the Northwoods. And really, the concept of the story is, when you're gathered around a campfire and somebody starts telling that creepy story in order to get you all scared before you go to your tent at night. It's kind of the what would happen if the campfire story was really true.
Mhm.
And so we break that down.
Yeah, that takes me back to my childhood days going to Girl Scout camp and
Hmm.
where you do sit around that campfire and you're telling those stories and you get creeped out. You don't want to walk back to your tent. It's just like, yeah,
That's so true.
yeah, I think that's going to bring back some memories there. So talk a little bit about what was the hardest scene for you to write in that book.
The hardest scene was probably, and I want to be careful not to put any spoilers, but I do have a main character who's going through a terminal illness.
Hmm.
And there is a scene where the family has to gather at the bedside, and it's a hospice situation. And I wrote that into the book when I wrote my first draft. I don't want to say I wrote it flippantly, but I just included it because it fit in the story. And then after I submitted my book, we found out that my mom actually had terminal cancer.
Hmm.
And we found out literally about 2 weeks before she passed. It was super fast. It was just a whirlwind, completely unexpected. And the edits for that book dropped and were due like 2 weeks after my mom passed away. So I had to go back and rework the scene, having just walked through something very similar. And so it was a difficult scene to write. On the flip side, it was also cathartic. And I think I was also able to put a little bit more,
Mhm.
unfortunately, personal experience vulnerability into the scene of ushering somebody that you love into their new life
Mm,
with the Lord and the hope that can come out of that, regardless of the grief. So,
mhm. Wow. My mom was diagnosed with cancer in March of 2020,
hmm,
and she just passed away last July.
okay,
So, I understand
yeah,
those feelings, and like the book that I'm writing too has a character
hmm,
that has cancer,
okay,
and that was written well before, my mother got
yeah,
cancer. So,
yeah.
yeah, seems like God maybe sometimes puts us in places, not that that's why it happens, but
He
he
uses
he
it,
he uses it. He uses
yeah,
those things,
for
yeah,
sure,
for his purpose.
for sure.
So, what are you hoping that the readers are going to take away from The Souls of Lost Lake?
I really hope that they can take away the concept of home. And when I say home, not necessarily a house, but a place of belonging and a place of finding out this is who I am and this is where I belong. And I think so many of us want to find that in a place or a person. And in reality, life doesn't always provide that. And I don't know that it's supposed to, because really our identity and our security and our place of belonging is really in the hands of the Lord and where He puts us and what He teaches us and what He takes us through. So I hope as readers read it, they can find that, regardless of your past, regardless of your future, regardless of, how society may view you, um, that you do have a home,
Mm-hmm.
and a place that isn't necessarily of this world, but you have a home. And that's really what I hope people can take out of The Souls of Lost Lake, which you really wouldn't necessarily equate to a story about an axe murderess from a forest. But,
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
hopefully some warm elements to the story as well.
Yeah, because I was sitting here thinking, gosh, that sounds amazing. Like, and I wasn't picturing that with what I've read about the book,
Yeah.
and the storyline. But gosh, if you can weave that in there, I, I
The storyline really does allow for it. The heroine from the past is basically rumored to have killed her family when she was a teenager. And there's always a question from the town, and she's ostracized, and a little bit held at arm's length. And so she's never really belonged anywhere. And she can't remember what happened. And so she has built up for herself her own walls of protection, but yet inside she just really wants to know where she belongs,
mm-hmm.
and have a place that she can just settle into and call home. And
Mm,
she finds out, as the story progresses, the characters are all working through elements of finding that place within your relationship with God and not
mm,
just the circumstances in your
mm-hmm.
life.
Okay, well now I really want to read the book. Like I'm really excited to read it. And hopefully those who are watching this are getting excited to read it too, because your descriptions of the storyline and the mystery behind it and even the hope elements and all of that just really is exciting to me to think about reading that story now. So thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. I love telling a story that has a message too. So.
Hmm. So how long does it usually take you to write a book, to do the draft and then to get it edited and ready to go?
Well, I have a book due every 6 months.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I typically, and I'm a strange writer, so I don't recommend this for anybody wanting to write a book, but I typically mentally will develop the story in my head, kind of like watching a movie. And I'll watch it multiple times over the course of a few months. And then, like right now, my book is due in about 3 weeks and I've got it about half written. So I'll finish the rest. But it's at this point, it's so much in my mind. It's like just dissertation onto a paper at this point. So
Wow. That's amazing.
yeah,
What a
it's not an orthodox way of writing. It's
Yeah.
definitely definitely unique and
Uh-huh.
not always the most practical. This is the time I also hope I don't get sick because then
Yeah. Yeah,
the
exactly.
proverbial last minute or so.
Yeah, so to wrap this up, talk a little bit to aspiring authors and what kind of advice you would give to someone who says, "Hey, I'd like to write a book and get it
Sure.
published one day."
Sure. Yeah. Well, I love working with aspiring authors. It's one of the things that I do on the side through my Madlit mentoring program that I actually have. But one of the things that I tell authors, sorry, my cat is making noise. That's what happens
It's
when you have a cat,
at
you know.
least the possum's not in the
The
house.
possum is not in the house. I do, however, have a cat that just knocked over the spotlight. Um, for aspiring authors, to me, the biggest thing is just start writing. And we can get so wrapped up as authors in the rules, the how to, the structure, the plot. And yes, those are all so very important when you're wanting to write a really good book. But to just get started, being able to just put a story to paper is such a huge first step. And to finish the story, write it to the end, even if it's the worst story you've ever read, ever written, and you never want anybody to see it in the light of day, just start writing. Because I think so often as new authors, we get tied up with the how to's that we never actually get to doing it.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's good advice. I know for me, I had no idea the how to. I just said,
Mhm.
I'm going to jump in there and write it.
Good.
So
Great.
I did,
Yeah.
with not having a clue what I was doing. So that's
Uh-huh.
why I'm still editing.
Well, and that's true. But then the other advantage you probably have, which is the other tip, is read. Be a
Oh,
reader,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
because a lot of those storytelling things come instinctually because you're
Hmm.
well read.
Hmm. That's true. That's true. Because when I question, like, how in the world could I sit down and just write a book and have a cohesive story, at the
Right.
end? But it is, I really think, because I have read so
Hmm.
much throughout my life, you just kind of know what should come next
Right.
in a
Right.
story.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you so much for giving your valuable time to this interview. It's been such a pleasure meeting you and getting to
Um,
know a little bit about you and your writing process and your book. I'm super excited about it. And I'm excited that you're offering a copy as a giveaway for
yeah.
one of our watchers who
Yep.
comments on this post. So excited for whoever that's going to be. Uh,
Absolutely.
so thank you, Jamie Joe, and I'm looking forward to seeing your book come out. And I wish you all the best for that book and all the others and those yet to come.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, you have a good rest of your day.
You too.